U.S. intelligence report warning that China and Russia are using cyber espionage to steal trade secrets to bolster their own economic development. This coming on the heels of an earlier report that Chinese hackers were targeting U.S. chemical companies. Michael Chertoff is former Secretary of Homeland Security and co-founder of the Chertoff Group, consulting with governments and private companies on this very issue. Mr. Secretary, great of you to be here today. When we talk about China, but let's stick with China, Russia as well, are we talking about the government directing virtually all economic hacking, if you will?
Well, this is one of the great challenges of dealing with cybersecurity, which is what we call the issue of attribution. Who is really responsible? When you talk about foreign governments, they almost always take the position that it's not them, it's just criminals acting on their own. But obviously in countries like China and Russia, where the government plays a fairly heavy-handed role on the Internet, there's good reason to suspect the government is at least tacitly encouraging, if not explicitly authorizing, this kind of behavior.
How rapidly is the problem growing? Because it's one of those things that if you talk about it to people, they kind of nod their head at you. But until it actually impacts an individual's bottom line or personal information or financial information, it doesn't really resonate with people.
Well, it's a huge problem because it really strikes at the competitive edge that we bring to technology development. I mean, look at it this way. We spend billions of dollars on research and development, and some of that, of course, winds up pursuing blind alleys. If someone can come along and steal the benefit of all that at a fraction of the cost and then implement it and go to market at the same time we do, they've got a tremendous competitive advantage. In many ways, this kind of technology is the crown jewels of the American economic system, and those jewels are being stolen literally on a daily basis by competitors overseas.
How well or not are companies and our own government keeping up with fending off these attacks?
Well, I think the good news is people are focused on it. I know, for example, in the power industry, which we work with, there's now an increased focus on the importance of protecting our electric grid against cyber attacks. But the enemy and those who are criminals who exploit the system are constantly evolving and constantly changing their tactics. And I do think we need some additional help here in terms of government, not only some government assistance, but government information and perhaps even some government regulation to make sure that we don't have vulnerabilities in our own networks that are hurting everybody.
Do you think that's possible at this point?
Well, I do think there's a kind of an agreement now in general, both in the business community and in Washington, that we need to take steps. The question is, what are those steps going to be? And I'm not an advocate of a heavy-handed government presence on the Internet.
Well, I was going to say that. I was going to say that. It is so tricky to find the line.
But here's what the government can do. There's an awful lot of information the government can share that either legal rules or concerns about classification have prevented us from sharing. And I think we've got to be more flexible in sharing. I think there are some businesses that need encouragement to invest in cybersecurity, whether it's liability protection, whether it is in fact some legal requirement that critical infrastructure do take steps to protect the whole community. So there's a way to proceed with this that doesn't require the government sitting on the Internet, that doesn't overburden business, but that makes sure that everybody takes a reasonable level of responsibility for their own cybersecurity and the consequences to the community as a whole.
Michael, it was great to see you. Thank you so much for being here. Michael Chertoff of the Chertoff Group, former Secretary of Homeland Security. Take care.
Good to be on.
Have you been surprised